Welcome everyone to the second Photography Bench Show workshop. I'm excited for our April bench show entitled Spring Fling, where we will be showcasing our gorgeous close-up and macro photographs. I'm Jill Kaur, Chair of Photography for our club and the Zone 2 rep for the GCA Photography Committee. We will begin our slideshow with a review of the schedule for photography. It differs very little from the last schedule with the exception of our class descriptions. The membership meeting and the bench show will occur on Wednesday, April 14th at 10 a.m. following the business meeting. Entries must be submitted by April 6th at midnight. Email your entries to the usual address, newslettereditor@sgc@gmail.com. Now, let's review the 4 classes of entry. Class 1 is a close-up of a flower or plant material in color. Here is an example. At this point, it's important to understand the difference between a close-up and a macro photograph. The GCA offers a glossary of terms in their flower show and judging guide called the Yellow Book, book number 5. Their definition of a close-up is a photo taken close to the subject or with a long focal length lens to permit a close and detailed view of the object. The object fills most of the frame. So the photo you see here is an example of a close-up. The GCA defines a macro photo as an image in which the subject is greater than life size. The original object must be no larger than 1 inch by 1.5 inches. Suffice to say that most of the images that we present, especially using our iPhones as cameras, will be close-up and not macro unless we attach a macro lens to our cameras. This is a macro shot example. It's a very small little feather that's magnified 10 times using an attachable lens to my iPhone. Class 2 is a color close-up or a macro photograph of a flower or a plant element with a living creature resting on it, such as a butterfly or a bee or a worm or an insect or even a frog. Class 3 is a color close-up or a macro photograph of a flower or a plant element which captures the moisture from guttation, rain, or the help of a spritzer. Class 4 is a close-up of a macro or a flower or plant material in monochrome. The official GCA definition of monochrome is if it gives the impression of having no color. An example is it contains only shades of gray, which can include pure black and pure white, or it gives the impression of being a grayscale image that has been toned in one color across the entire image. For example, sepia, shots, red, gold, etc. Here's a good example of a monochrome image, thanks to Dodie Bump for her contribution. Now let's review the entry rules. 1 entry of a digital photo per SGC member. If we can allow more, we will send out a second invitation. Number 2, photos must be 1 to 5 megabytes in size. If you have trouble determining the size of your photo, don't hesitate to email me the photo. Don't text it to me, but email it to me. If you text it, it loses lots of resolution. So email it to me and I'll help you determine the size. Number 3, photos will not be accepted if received after the deadline. Number 4, digital photos must be attached to an email addressed to newslettereditor@sgc gmail.com. Number 5, the files should be labeled firstname_lastname.jpg. An example, Susie_Jones.jpg. Number 6, the email subject should read your name, Photography Bench Show April. That way, when I see it among the many emails I receive, I will know it's an important entry. Number 7, all entries should be the work of the member only. Any editing should be the work of the member. Next, minimal post-processing or editing is allowed, but the photo should not be altered significantly. For questions, please call me at 860-961-2256 or email me at newslettereditor@sgc@gmail.com. The bench show procedure is as follows. After the photographs have been submitted, Photo Chair Jill Kaur will send them to the GCA official judge for comments. The judge will submit her comments prior to the viewing of submissions at the April meeting, and portions of the comments will be read to the membership during the presentation. Full comments will then be emailed to the submitters following the meeting. Thanks to Laura Frommer for this beautiful submission. Now let's review some basic tips in macro photography. As you may recall, I shared some tips in the February newsletter as well, so you can also reference that. After we review shooting in close-up and macro, I'm going to show you 2 great videos on how to shoot close-up and macro using an iPhone, or a cell phone, or a digital camera. The second video will show you how to shoot using attachable lenses to your iPhone to get really, really close for those great artistic images. So tip number 1, there is beauty everywhere. Thanks to Dodie for sending this shot in. The old saying, practice makes perfect, is particularly applicable to macro photography. Outdoor macro photography is famously fun and rewarding. Just about everything around you can be photographed. Plants, flowers, insects, grass, weeds, rocks, bugs, you name it. There's some aspect of just about everything in nature that could turn into a fabulous macro or close-up shot. Lots of people fall in love with close-up photography right in their own backyard, as exemplified here. But the opportunities for great macro shooting don't stop at your doorstep. Most objects you find indoors are also fascinating at super close range. How about the vegetables in your refrigerator? The knickknacks on your shelves, even the contents of your pocket, can provide a happy afternoon of macro experimentation. Though the actual steps you take are the same ones that you take in any other form of photography, the fact that you're shooting tiny little objects from a very close distance puts a whole new and different spin on everything. Let's review depth of field. The closer you get to your subject, the shallower the depth of field or the region of sharp focus becomes. And this effect can make it very difficult to get your entire subject in focus. If you are using a point-and-shoot camera, there's nothing you can do about it. But if you're using a DSLR camera or even an iPhone, you can increase the depth of field by decreasing your aperture or choosing a larger f number as you would in portrait mode on your iPhone, or learn how to hold the focus on your screen. A good solution is to take lots and lots of photographs. Get really familiar with your camera's capabilities and figure out what combination of aperture and depth of field and every other parameter works best for you. All cameras and even cell phones are all different from one another, even the various models of cell phones. So understand what you and your camera can do to get your best photograph. We reviewed depth of field in my last workshop, and you can review that if you want to understand a little bit more about it. By understanding focus and knowing how to focus using your iPhone will result in shots with a lovely depth of field, which again means highlighting the subject and blurring the background, such as seen in this beautiful photograph by Laura Frommer. Always set the focus and exposure on your screen. If you're using a point-and-shoot camera, manual focus isn't going to be an option. But if you're using a DSLR camera, you can get the best macro shots by doing the focusing yourself rather than relying on the camera's autofocus capability. If you are able to view my last tutorial, you're going to know how to focus using your iPhone. You can refer back to that tutorial again for a refresher on both focus and exposure. I can't overestimate the importance of holding your camera as still as possible. Use a tripod if you can, or even a remote shutter release, or set up your shot so that your camera is as absolutely stable as you can make it. The blurring effects of even the tiniest movements are exaggerated at high magnification and very close range. So keeping your camera as motionless as possible is the absolute key to getting your best photographs. I like to rest my iPhone or my camera on something when I shoot. Remember that even when you touch your screen to shoot, your camera will move. So stabilize it as best you can to eliminate camera shake. Next, adjust the subject inside the frame. When you're shooting a staged subject, get your camera fixed and don't move it. Once you've got your shot framed, light balanced, and well in focus, keep your camera exactly as it is and make any adjustments to your subject by moving the subject itself. Try arranging your subject on a surface that can be easily moved or elevated. This can be a major, major time saver. Try backgrounds with different colors. Obviously, this isn't going to be an option if you're shooting outdoors. But if you're shooting indoors, try using different backgrounds. You might be surprised at the variety of effects you get, like the one shown here by Laura Frommer. You can shoot against a colored wall or drape fabric behind your subject, or using construction paper. Once I used colored gift-wrapped paper. I taped it to a solid surface, and I put my subject in front of it for sort of an aged effect. It looked really cool. Remember that everything gets magnified. When you're shooting macro, everything shows up. Dust, water spots, pet hair, fingerprints, you name it. Stuff that you can't even see with the naked eye suddenly becomes rather annoyingly ultra-visible in very close-up, highly magnified photos. So that's about it for tips. The first video explains a number of elements in macro and close-up photography. This photographer offers a distinction between the terms macro and close-up. Although we call close-up photography macro and vice versa, for the purposes of our bench show, most of our shots will be actually close-up. But that's okay for our purposes. He also refers to locking focus and demonstrates using the Camera Plus application to demonstrate it. You don't need to download the Camera Plus app to lock your focus or to learn how to lock your focus. We discussed how to lock focus in our last tutorial. But the Camera Plus app is a really, really wonderful app to own because it has a dedicated macro feature which allows for clearer and more accurate shots. So let's watch this video and learn more about close-up and macro photography using our iPhones.
Close-up photography is when you're getting as close to the subject as you possibly can with your iPhone camera without the help of any special lens attachments or third-party app help. And as you'll see in a minute, that magic distance number is about 3 to 4 inches. Macro photography, on the other hand, is when the image on the sensor is greater than life size, as illustrated here. For example, a 2x macro is twice as close. A 3x macro is 3 times as close, etc. When it comes to macro or close-up photography, how close can you get? Simple answer, about 3 inches away with the iPhone camera. Surprisingly, that's plenty close for a whole lot of macro and close-up subjects. Check out this cool series of flower shots that I shot without any lens attachments, all at 3 inches away. So my first suggestion for focusing on macro or close-up objects is to not shoot in auto mode, but shoot in manual mode. If we were shooting in auto mode, the camera really wouldn't know where to focus. Does it focus on this plankton, this one, the moss, the stick? So that's why it's important when you're fine-tuning your focus controls, particularly in close-up photography, that you go to manual and take it off auto. When you're shooting, lock your focus. Speaking of the great Camera Plus 6 photo app, you are going to absolutely love the new macro shooting mode. The macro shooting mode is going to get you closer than ever. I want to show you this really cool feature in Camera Plus 6 called the macro shooting mode. Now let's just take a shot before we go to macro mode. You can see right there. I'm going to make a couple minor adjustments. I'm going to adjust exposure just a little bit. Lock that exposure in, take a shot, go to white balance, hit shade. That warms the scene up. Minimize the white balance window. Now there's my shot. No macro shooting mode, straight out of the camera, about 3 inches away. Boom, there's the shot. Now I want to go to the macro shooting mode, so I hit the plus sign, hit the macro icon on the bottom, minimize the window again. Look at that. Look how close I am. Wow, that is just awesome. I'm going to check my focus on the manual wheel. Look at that. I can check my focus. There I am. I like that focus point. Boom. Minimize the window again. Take my shot. Americana. There you have it. Just look at this gallery of reptiles and insects that I shot at a local pet store, all in macro shooting mode. When you're shooting close-up subjects, you're going to need, generally speaking, more light than the auto meter indicates. So I like to overexpose my macro subjects up to 1 full stop. Now, of course, to use exposure compensation, you're going to need a camera or photo app that allows you to create bracketed exposure just like you can with Camera Plus 6. Let's take these shells, let's shoot a shot in the default mode. Doesn't actually look bad, but now I'm going to go to the exposure compensation wheel, and you can see I can lighten the shot or I can darken the shot. And in this case, I'm going to lighten it just a little bit because in macro it just looks a little more normal. As with all photography, but especially close-up or macro photography, lighting is everything. No light, you don't have a good picture. So let me give you a primer on lighting and then apply that to macro or close-up photography. Awareness of light. There's no laws, only gentle guidelines. Source of light. It can be either natural or artificial. Front light for most subjects, backlight for silhouettes, overhead light for most landscapes and scenics, and side light to reveal texture. The quality of light, it's either hard light or soft light. Color of light. It can be warm or cool. So let's apply that lighting primer to macro photography. And let me give you the best tip that I can. What's the best lighting for macro photography? Natural, soft, warm. One of my favorite accessories for shooting close-up photography or product photography is from a company called Modahouse. I particularly like and use the white backgrounds because it makes the images pop. When I'm shooting small product and up close and I want it white and I don't want the crease in the background, this is what I use. It's Modahouse. Again, if you shoot small product in macro and close-up photography, check it out. They're really good. If you want to get closer than 3 inches, you need to use a third-party attachment lens to get close, even real close. My 2 runaway favorite third-party attachment lenses are iPro lens and Oloclip. What I especially love about the Oloclip 3-in-1 macro kit is that it's 3 lenses at 3 different magnifications, 7x, 14x, and 21x. That's close. All attachment lenses work pretty much like this. There's no such thing as, you can't focus on the barrel of the attachment lens, so you focus like this. That's how you focus. So what is the ideal accessory kit for the close-up photographer when it comes to iPhone photography? Number 1, the Oloclip. Number 2, the Manfrotto Pixie Mini Tripod. And I cannot underscore enough the importance of using a tripod when you're shooting macro photography to minimize, even eliminate, shakes and camera blurs. Number 3, and one of my favorites, the Me Photo Tripod with a Sidekick 360 adapter that attaches phone to tripod. Number 4, a shutter remote from iStabilizer. And number 5, and I know you all have these, the ear pods that come packaged with the iPhone that allow you to use the volume up button to trigger your shutter. Let me give you some final advice. Spend a day shooting everything at 3 inches away. Then once you've conquered that, go to the Camera Plus 6 macro shooting mode and get even closer. Want to get closer? Then use a third-party attachment lens to get all the way up to 21x. Generally speaking, we are not trained to see the world in macro. We have more of a wide-angle view of life. But trust me on this. Once you get the close-up and macro bug, you will spend countless hours shooting all the fun and fine detail that life has to offer. Get close.
Okay, sorry about that. The next and final video will again feature true macro photography using an iPhone and a special lens that can be purchased for the iPhone to capture the real macro features in plants, just like you saw in the previous video. True macro photography opens the world to discovering elements of a plant or flower that one does not see with the naked eye. The resulting effect is a beautiful art form. So let's give this a watch and discover again how to take beautiful photographs at the next level. I do want to mention that you don't have to buy a special lens for your photography. If, however, there are those among you who want to take your photography to the next level, you are most welcome to experiment, and I'm here for you to help you and show you fun ways for macro and close-up photography. You're going to get some great shots either way, though. And the only real way, though, is to experiment. So let's take a look.
So here's the thing. We came back to our own backyard and we have the same opportunities that I was talking about. We walked right by this. And this is going to happen to you. This happens to most photographers. They walk by so many opportunities because we're looking for this giant landscape. We're looking for the grand scape, but we're not seeing those small details. We walked right by this on the way to that forest, and it wasn't until we got back here that we realized the shots that we were looking for, the color, the detail, they were literally at our front door, exactly what I told you. So here we have this gorgeous flower. It has a lot of color. It has everything that we were looking for hours in the forest. But it's the fall. We don't have that color. So you can cheat a little bit. You can use flowers that are right in front of your door. So I'm going to open up the camera app and I'm simply going to point it to a specific area. Now, this whole flower here, it has a lot of details. Let me show you what I'm talking about. We can choose any part of this flower, but this is close-up and macro photography right here. If I just took this photo, it's a flower, right? It's nice, it's colorful, it's all right, you know, it's a flower. Everyone's seen a flower before. But the beauty of macro photography is we can focus on the details. We can study the world at a much smaller scale. And when we understand that, when we look close, when we slow down and really get close up, the whole landscape changes. It's no longer just a flower, it's all the details that are created. It's all those details that make up the flower that we're gonna study. That's the cool thing. That's the beauty of macro photography. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Instead of taking this just photo of a flower, which again is beautiful, we need to get closer, right? So how are we going to do that? The first step is simply just to zoom in. If we have a 2x telephoto lens, that's the next step to try. So I'm going to click where it says 1x, and now right away you're going to notice that I'm much closer. And I'm going to get as close as I can. And here's a good opportunity for me to explain actually a little bit of the technical details about this. Every lens has what we call a minimal focus distance. We can only get so close before the lens can't focus anymore. What's cool about the iPhone is it's going to continuously focus for us until it simply can't focus anymore. Then we need to back it out a little bit. So if I were to focus on just one detail, right, that's the whole point of this. I don't want to look at the flower as a whole. I want to focus on this detail here, just that part of that flower that I find the most interesting. Now, what I want to do is get as close as I can. I'm going to get closer and closer and closer. And as I do that, you'll notice it's still in focus. It's still in focus. And just about here, now it's out of focus. I can't, even if I tap the screen to try and get focus, it's not going to acquire focus. That's how you're going to know that you've reached beyond that minimal focus distance. So the whole key to this is simply to back it away just to the point to where you can get focus, right about there. And then I'm going to take that photo. So that's the closest I can physically get with this lens setup. My telephoto lens, and then as close as possible before I start losing focus. So right away, if we compare this image we just took to the first picture, it's already starting to look more interesting. It's not just that whole flower, it's a part of it. So we're starting to discover the details, what makes this flower so beautiful. But we don't have to stop there. That's close-up photography. But what we want to get into now is macro photography. We want to get in really close. We want to get in so close that it's not even a flower anymore. We're taking whatever is in front of our lens and we're taking it out of context. Now it's fibers, now it's texture, now it's colors. That's when the whole world starts to open up for you. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use this. This is a macro lens that's made by a company called Moment. And what it does is you have to buy a special case. They make them for pretty much all of the phones, all of the iPhones. You want to make sure you get the right case that's going to fit your phone. And the reason is it has a little thread around the lenses. And then the lenses themselves that they sell a variety of lenses. I'm using a macro lens right now. It will just screw in just like this. I can get much closer, way closer than I can with just that native lens. Let me show you what this is going to look like. Once I put this on and I'm in my native camera app and I point it towards my subject, this is exactly what the screen's going to look like. It's going to look terrible. You're not going to be able to see anything. The native camera app is not going to work well with the 2x telephoto lens and that macro on top of it. What it's trying to do, it's going to say, you know what, I can't see anything. I'm going to switch over to my 1x view. So it's going to try and override what we're trying to do. So what we need is a way to force the camera to use that telephoto lens with that macro on top of it. This is why we're going to switch to another app that I use quite often, and it's Lightroom. Now it's a free app, and it's going to let us stay inside of it. It's going to allow us to force the camera to use that 2x lens, thereby allowing us to use that macro lens with that 2x lens to get as close as physically possible. Now, if we want to open up the camera app inside of Lightroom Mobile, I'm going to click on the bottom right-hand corner, and that's going to take me into the camera app. Now that we have that launched, one last thing we need to do is you'll see about the third from the top, there will be like a little lens icon. Tapping that is going to allow us to switch between wide and telephoto. The thing is, here in this app, instead of the native camera app with the iPhone, it will stay there. It won't try and switch back and forth. So that's how we can force the camera app to stay inside of telephoto, allowing us to use this moment lens, this macro lens, to get as close as possible. So I'm going to tap, make sure it says T for telephoto, and that's how we know we're in the right mode. Now let's get started. So here I am inside of that Lightroom app, and again, it's going to look like we're drunk, right? I might be drunk, I might not be drunk, but it's going to look like the camera is drunk. The reason is it's trying to focus on something close, and we're not giving anything close to focus on yet. But watch this. You're just going to see a pink blurb in that photo, but once I start getting closer and closer and closer, right, I'm going past the part where it's a flower. I'm going past the part where it's just the top of that flower, and now I'm going into the details of the flower. That's macro photography right there. We're literally getting right into that flower. So here's the thing. As we get closer and closer and closer, here is where we start to see the magic. The world at a small scale. Now I'm going to take a bunch of photos because it's actually quite difficult to get everything in focus, and you're so close that things start moving around and shifting just with the tiniest bit of movement. So I'm going to take that photo here. I think that looks really cool. We've completely taken it out of context. It's no longer a flower. It's these crazy shapes. It's these crazy colors and details and lines and textures. We're taking everything out of context and getting into the scale of the flower itself, creating a whole new world and a whole new world of photographic opportunities too. If this starts shaking a lot, right, which is going to happen to you too, first of all, on a windy day, you do need to be careful because any tiny little movement, any small little vibration is going to make a difference. What you can do is simply hold the flower. And now I can prevent everything from moving on me and get the exact shot that I want. So you can kind of take a little bit of control if it's a windy day, just something to keep in mind. So check this out. This is the before shot, which is just a nice pretty photo of a flower. Totally fine, that's not an issue. But we can do so much more. Watch what happens when we slap a macro lens in front of a telephoto lens and force it to shoot as close as possible. This is what happens. This just blows my mind. If you really think about this, if you get this, everything becomes a potential photographic opportunity. It is literally at your feet. It is literally at your front door. How cool is that?
Okay, that was pretty cool. So good luck, everybody. Get out there and take some wonderful photography close-up or macro shots with your iPhones or your DSLR cameras, and let's all show them off at the Spring Bench Show, Spring Fling. Remember, I am here for you, as well as Dodie Bump and Laura Frommer, both incredible photographers and artists. We can't wait to see your photography. See you at the bench show.